All right, Mike. So I guess actually before I start, she's going to have to edit. Um, Welcome Michael Orm to our spotlight. He's an inputs associate with Innova Ag Solutions in Central Butte, and he has a Bachelor of Agriculture Business degree from the U of S, and he's going to share sort of his career journey with us and what it takes to be an ag specialist. If you're a student watching this on YouTube, or there is a survey that's available in the link. Please fill in that survey. It helps us with funding and to get information on how to improve these. It also will give you an opportunity to be entered into a draw for $50 gift certificate. So with that, I will sign out and get Mike going.
All right, looks like we're getting close. I guess, hi everybody, Mike Gorham. I think we're good to go. I'm not even sure yet. Hey everybody, Mike Orem. Central Butte, Saskatchewan is the town that I'm from. I grew up here on a grain farm just north of town. We had cattle and other things as we were growing up. But as I got older and a little bit wiser, I should say, started slowly phasing out the cattle side of things. And actually, it used to be my dad and his brother, we used to farm together as two families. Now it's just me and my family on our own. And basically, long story short, went to the U of S after graduating Central Butte. That's kind of how I know Mr. Wist for the most part. I believe he taught me chemistry, biology, phys ed, and numerous other things. And obviously was my high school football coach as well, and principal for probably a good portion of the time. So that's the connection there. And after high school, went to the U of S, took a 4 years bachelor's degree in agribusiness, which is basically, they started a new program kind of in the mid 2000s. A lot of kids were wanting their business degree, but going back into agriculture for the most part. So therefore, they just kind of combined the two and then made a degree out of it. If you go to college and just get any finance or any kind of business degree, for the most part, it's kind of the same thing as agribusiness. So therefore, if you're wanting to go that route, not necessarily wanting to get back into the agriculture business for the most part, you just want to get a business degree and all of a sudden you graduate and an opportunity comes up. That might even be a better way to go, I should say, for those of you that maybe aren't from rural Saskatchewan or grew up on a farm. Former gigs. So I guess my kind of journey through the ag business, I was a summer student at the local Tagaski co-op here, pushing a broom and delivering chemical, and kind of doing all those tasks that, quite frankly, your boss or those senior to you don't want to do. Went back to school the next summer, got a job as a chemical associate with BASF. So basically, it was covering a territory from Davidson to Moose Jaw to Swift Current for the most part. And again, was just another job in which you were kind of dipping your toes into being a salesperson, talking to farmers, talking to retails, trying to get them to buy more BASF chemicals at the time, I guess. And then once I did graduate from the U of S, got a job with Cargill as a grain marketing specialist. So long story of that one is you worked specifically with about 15 to 25 farmers and you told them when to and when not to sell grain, which with the way commodity prices are going this year, it's probably a good thing I got out when I did, because I'm kind of enjoying being on the other side of things, selling grain and not necessarily telling guys when to. Because if you want to talk about stress, 30% increase in the price of canola is definitely some stress with the guys that took over my position. So duties, the current job I have, and I guess this is where my life is probably different to most of those that are actually in the ag industry, being that in the next 5 years, I'm probably going to, retire from the professional sector and just go strictly into farming. once dad kind of gets to a point where he doesn't want to do the day-to-day work. But my current job, the reason I left Cargill and started here with Innova Ag Solutions, one, it's local, and two, they're pretty flexible and giving me enough time off to actually go home and help, seed and combine and spray and all that kind of fun stuff. But typically my job right now, it's not too exciting, but for the most part, sell chemical fertilizer and seed. So essentially canola seed for the most part, you can get into durum wheat and certified seed. We don't do that there. But in the summer, need to scout crops, help farmers solve problems that come around, maybe weeds that they haven't necessarily come across before, or disease factors, if we ever do get enough rain to cause some disease. And then basically there's the other side of it, business planning, schedule planning, anticipating price jumps or decreases in the commodities that you're selling, mainly fertilizer, I should say, and then hedging that anticipation. Now, the place I work at probably is going to be quite a bit different than the majority of the ag retails that are out there, simply because I work at what we call an independent. So it's basically one retail, one town, 7 of us in an office for the most part. If you go and work for somebody like Cargill or Viterra, Richardson, Nutrien, I guess now, not, it's going to be a little bit different. Your job and your duties are going to differ depending on the place you go and how they want you to conduct yourself. So like, I get to see behind the curtain a little bit more on the financial side and the buying side with this place. When you work for Cargill or something else, you know what you're trying to sell for, and that's it. Here's the price list. Go talk to these farmers, see what they need, try to get more business out of that for the most part. Whereas here, not only am I selling to the farmers, but actually you're dealing with you're dealing with the wholesalers, you're dealing with the chemical companies themselves, whether it be Bayer, BASF, FMC, all these different types of jobs or companies. And even from a wholesaling side for fertilizer, dealing with Yara, CNF, Simplot, and others, buying and selling, and then trying to make a little bit of money along the way. So this is not the place I work at, but I will say, for those of you that have never seen a retail place, this is kind of the generic layout for the most part. You're going to have some sort of a chem shed connected to an office space, and then about 10 rows or 10 bins connected to some sort of a blending facility, gravel everywhere, and trying to make it as easy for the farmer to come in and grab product and leave as possible. But for the most part, the only vehicles that you're really going to need to drive is probably a forklift and have some sort of a level 5 driver's license for the most part. If by some chance you have a 1A or something like that, that definitely is a bonus, I should say, but not necessarily by any stretch. And of course, being a farmer myself, obviously tractors and combines and everything else kind of comes in handy when it does get into slow seasons for the most part, especially at some retails. Some places do allow you to kind of go out and help farmers in the area at the busy times of year. So that's a nice way to kind of double dip, I should say, depending on the place that you work at. So me being lucky enough, kind of working 2 separate jobs in the same time frame. So, selling crop inputs and farming at the same time. Likely unknown duties. Well, this one probably is going to keep changing every year as health and safety becomes more and more a part of the agricultural community. Your unknown duties become less and less because, quite frankly, to do anything nowadays, you've got to go through about a week's worth of training in order for the bigger companies to let you know. But essentially, at my place of work, I was hired to sell, but obviously people take holidays, people are sick, especially with pandemic going on. Certain people might have to mix weeks at a time in order to make sure that they're not spreading it around. So therefore, all of a sudden, you're fixing stuff, you're organizing the chem shed, you're blending fertilizer, you're unloading fertilizer, you're delivering and even some days you're doing office work just by entering in load tickets and everything else, and maybe doing some financial side of things. But just there's one thing in the ag industry that we don't like, and it's when people say that's not my job. If you work for the company and we ask you to do something like please help out, there's going to be times it's not like we have a staff of 50 people. There's only 10 of us with everybody there. So sometimes you're going to be doing stuff that you weren't necessarily hired for, but in order to help out everybody else in the building, you kind of need to do it. Rewards. I guess the flexibility side of things is the biggest thing, especially for me. I know in any other industry, I would not be able to work a full-time job and get full-time pay while being able to take time off to go farming for the most part. And I don't know what kind of students I'm talking to here, how many of you are rural or live in the city or for the most part, but the ag industry is a very small community, and they're willing to help you out in kind of whatever you need as far as taking time off, or if you have other ambitions, they can kind of, or even, especially for the women, mat leaves and everything else, and flexible work arrangements where maybe you're working at home for a couple days a week, or you need to, drop a kid off at 9 o'clock at school and get to the work by 9:30. A lot of that is becoming more and more available. And the other thing is just working with the farmers. It's one of those, it's like any client relationship. Basically, you want to see your clients succeed as best as possible. And if you stick around long enough, you kind of become part of the farm, I should say. You become part of the farm, part of the family. And even in the last job I was in, you got to know everything about them. I was being a grain marketing specialist. I knew all their expenses, all their incomes. I knew I was giving advice on whether they should buy, sell, lease equipment and land, what kind of loans they should be taking out, all that kind of stuff. And you really work your way into the fiber of that family. And it's really rewarding, helping them succeed. And they become to rely on you. And that's a very good feeling. Obviously, like today, working outside would not be the best, but in the summertime, it's pretty nice. Typically, you're always scouting fields, walking around. And in the winter time, for the most part, 90% of the time, we are inside because nobody wants to be outside right now. Some of the perks with this industry, like I said, very small industry. So kind of everybody knows everybody. And quite frankly, there's a lot of money in this industry. Equipment now ranging up towards the $1 million mark for combines and sprayers, drills, etc. And quite frankly, your average 3,000 to 4,000 acre farmer is probably spending $1 million on inputs these days. So therefore, as a retail, you're selling millions and millions of dollars worth of chemical and fertilizer and so on. So therefore, the people that we're buying from and retailing it out for the wholesales, they've taken us on trips to Jamaica. They've taken us, if it wasn't for the pandemic, I think we were actually going to go to Oktoberfest in Germany this year with New Farm. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that for the most part. But a lot of it is, say, getting together at Crop Show or Farm Progress or something like that, meeting up with old friends, meeting up with people that you met in college, and just, having a drink and seeing how they're going for the most part. It's a very relaxed industry as far as the professionalism side of it goes, but it's a very hardworking industry at the same time. So therefore, you work as hard as you play, basically. So the harder you work, the more fun you get to have. Challenges and stressors. So like I said before, there's lots of money in this industry, and the farmers, it's a weird industry where there are no small farms anymore. I think the average farmer is now 7,000 acres in Saskatchewan for the most part. Not that long ago, it used to be about 3,000 or 4,000, and not that, maybe in the early 2000s, it might have been 2,000. So therefore, making a recommendation that either injures the crop or ruins a piece of equipment could cost that farmer thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars. And that is definitely a stress that you don't want to take on. So therefore, obviously there's insurance and everything that kind of covers it for the most part. But I guess just as, for instance, in this job, we didn't do it necessarily, but we kind of heard up north, and this usually happens at least once or twice a year, but guys would get in planes or, custom equipment to spray a field, and they happen to spray the wrong field. And of course, depending on the chemical you're using, can do quite a bit of damage. So obviously there's $1 million claims out there with sections or half sections that have been sprayed with the wrong chemical, and all of a sudden, and the worst part about it is, like most farmers, you only get one crack every year to grow a crop. So all of a sudden you kill that crop in the middle of June, it's going to take another year before you can, plant another crop and try to make more money. In my last job as a grain marketing advisor, for example, with the price where commodities are moving, take lentils back in 2015. Lentils started out the years at 23 cents a pound. So quick math in my head, let's say around 12 or 13 bucks. By the time the year was over, we ended up closer to 58 cents a pound, almost 35 to 40 bucks a bushel. And that is a major swing, and it doesn't happen every year. We're seeing a little bit more like this year, but I was working with about 23 farmers at the time, and the book I was working with just the amount of grain that they were selling was getting up towards that $50 million mark. And if I would have recommended them selling lentils closer to the 30s and say, I think we ended up in the mid 40s somewhere, but there was an $8 to $10 million swing amongst those 23 farmers, depending on when they sold that grain. So that keeps you up at night, obviously. You don't want to make a wrong recommendation and lose all that money because, not to be glib, but people have killed for less. So the other stressor is that in the middle of summer, very long hours. This is not a job where you're 8 to 5, with certain lunch breaks and certain coffee breaks or anything like that. In the wintertime, it's pretty easy. 8 o'clock to 5 o'clock, and we sit around and kind of talk, and you just basically kill the time until the snow goes away. But in the summertime, I think at work, and excuse my language, we call it the 100 days of hell, I should say. And basically from the middle of April to the middle of July, we work every day. Obviously, or I should say the business is open every day, and you might get every other weekend off to kind of do your own thing. But again, farmers will show up at the retail at 6 o'clock in the morning, and some of them will show up at 8:30 at night. So you're pulling some 12 to 15 hour days fairly regularly. And quite frankly, everything happens all at one time. So the short time frame that I'm referring to there is all of a sudden, let's say a bug or a disease has kind of worked its way into the area, and all of a sudden you need to scout 40 fields in the next 3 days. It's a lot of area to cover, and it's a lot of things to do. But if you want to keep that business and not have it go to the next place, you kind of have to do it. Obviously, missed opportunities. I won't say on that too much. Just maybe putting more fertilizer in the ground, or telling a guy that he doesn't need to spray disease, and all of a sudden maybe some sclerotinia works its way into canola and he loses money that way. So there's always stresses in that of telling a guy that he doesn't need something and having that go the wrong way on you. And again, it all relates back to how much money potentially a guy could make or lose. And the last one is just weather, and I think that one speaks for itself. We're definitely in an industry where if the weather, if you can't take on a week of drought, or not having, or too much rain, or not enough rain, or not being able to do stuff when you can, weather is I don't know if there's any other industry necessarily that if they see rain at harvest time or no rain during spring, how much stress that kind of adds to everything else that's going on in your life, I should say. Salaries and benefits. So I would say for anybody that's looking for a summer job, I should say, quite frankly, you're going to make anywhere from $15 to $20 an hour, maybe 25. We go back to the same company for 3 summers in a row. Once you do get into the industry, generally, probably 50,000 is where you start up. And after that, it's all up to you. For the most part, on average, $80,000 to $120,000 base salary is probably somewhere in the ballpark for the most part if you've been in the industry for 10 to 20 years. But the industry is moving more and more towards either commissions or just bonus type payments for the most part. So long story short, you get a $70,000 salary, but I have known guys at Cargill that were getting up to $100,000 to $125,000 bonus at the end of the year if they were able to meet their targets that the company had set out for them. Now that's definitely the very high end of it for the most part. Probably 20 to 30 is more what you're expecting on a year in and year out basis. But again, it's all up to it's all up to you, and how hard do you want to work and how much time do you want to spend at it. And as a salesperson, the more you sell, the more you make for the most part. The benefits, it's going to depend on company by company. For the most part, I would say everybody has health and dental. You can choose a range if you want 90% coverage or 80% coverage. It all depends on what they're offering and what they're willing to give you. Some of the things that maybe at least you don't realize is as big at the time as you do now. Vehicles, expense accounts, and a cell phone. I have known people that have been in the industry for 25 years, driven a new vehicle every year, and have never paid for it. They've never had a cell phone bill or had to pay for a cell phone. And quite frankly, most of their travel meals have been expense. Now, companies are definitely cracking down a little bit more on the expense account kind of side as again, like I said, health and safety kind of moves into it, and the industry moves more into a professional atmosphere. They're cracking down and not letting you buy kind of what you used to. But like I say, in the job I work at, my vehicle payments basically paid for it. I get mileage, and plus I'll get fuel on top of that. And that in itself is probably $10,000 to $15,000 a year that you don't have to spend out of your own pocket. Now, obviously, when it comes to tax time, you get a bit of a negative on that front, but it's not nearly as bad as, say, if, people who have vehicles and phones understand where I'm coming from. Pensions, it's going to depend company by company. As you can see, I've already worked for 4 different companies, and my end result will be farming at the end of the day, so I don't necessarily have a pension. And the current job I'm working at, I don't have a pension where I'm working. But then again, I don't necessarily, it's the freedom of being able to farm and do all that stuff. So it's kind of, it depends on company by company and how long you work there for. So I don't know specifics on that one. There is no general pension across the industry, I should say. Supports and personal development. Quite frankly, if you are loyal to any company, they are willing to teach, pay for furthering your education. They will do whatever you want. The ag industry is an industry where we lack people, definitely good people and loyal people, because quite frankly, there are just less and less rural kids every year as the towns get smaller and people move into the cities. And we're not necessarily attracting those in urban centers just yet. So therefore, there's definitely some fighting over good, talented people. And if you are loyal to that company, whatever you want, they'll pay for it for the most part. IT support depends on the company, but yeah, usually there is no issues there. Very far and few between unions. I think Viterra used to have a union for the most part, but obviously they got sold out to Glencore and to Nutrien. So depending on, actually, some Nutrien locations I believe are still union and some of them aren't. But for the most part, it's an industry where, yeah, I don't know if unions are ever going to make its way into this part of the life. Certified crop advisor and professional agronomist. These are just letters you can get after your name, much like a university degree, that just kind of helps you if you are moving from job to job. It's kind of that rubber stamp, Kate, you know, this guy knows what he's talking about, and obviously he's a professional agronomist, so therefore we can hire this person and go out and check fields, make crop recommendations, and so on and so forth. It's getting to the point now, actually, I think in most retails, they might require at least one person to have their CCA and their professional agronomist, and that person might have to sign off on every chemical and fertilizer recommendation that's been given out. Again, this is going more towards environmental factors and making sure that farmers aren't going off script, as it were, as far as chemicals, because there's definitely ways you can use these chemicals that they were not designed for, as far as killing crops in certain ways. So therefore, they're cracking down on that more and more. But the long and short of it, the ag world's a very small world, and people are willing to help and do what they need to do as long as you're loyal and willing to work for them, I should say. Opportunities, like I was saying before, we definitely have a lack of people. I guess the funniest one we have is Cargill and Moose Jaw was looking for a grain buyer, literally just call farmers on the price and see if they want to move some tons. And we ended up hiring a guy straight out of the Ukraine, straight out of Kiev, barely spoke English, didn't have a driver's license, didn't know the difference between canola and wheat. Hey, bring you in 6 months, follow somebody around, then we'll give you a book. And he is now probably one of the better grain buyers and one of the better people to work with when I was there. And I mean, he basically came from absolutely zero knowledge of the industry to all of a sudden being one of the better ones. And he works hard, and he does a very good job. So I mean, there's definitely they're willing to help you out. If you want to move up in the industry quick, if you want to get into higher levels of some of these major companies, you got to be willing to move around. So for example, when I first started out, I lived in Yorkton for a few months to learn the job. I was out there, and then I moved back to Davidson, took the job there, but I was traveling around from anywhere from Balcarres to South Swift Current, just to do the jobs that needed to be doing. And if you wanted to become manager level, or somewhere up higher in corporate, it might only take 10 years and you can get there, but you got to be willing not to necessarily live downtown Regina or in the middle of Saskatoon for the most part, because there's definitely lots of work out there. There's just not necessarily lots of work in the major centers. Work hard. It's definitely an industry that rewards those that want to work, I should say. If you tend to be a bit of a lazier person, word gets around quickly, and it's going to be hard to find work and hard to find places to work, I should say. Education helps, but is not necessarily like my last comment with the guy at Cargill from the Ukraine. Obviously didn't have education of any kind when he came here. But if you kind of want to jump a couple of rings in the ladder, having an agronomy degree or having a business degree of some sort definitely helps. And quite frankly, they're going to teach you a lot of the basic things to kind of get you started in the industry for the most part. I guess I'm cheating a little bit here because I grew up on a farm, so a lot of the stuff I learned in college wasn't necessarily new to me. But those of you that didn't grow up on a farm, it would definitely help out, and it would move your career path along a lot quicker. And there's always room for entrepreneurs. If you've got an idea, especially if any of you are kind of tech savvy for the most part, the industry is definitely moving more and more towards apps and iPads and stuff that can track what they're doing on a day in and day out basis. And if some of you can come along and create an app that's actually user friendly, unlike the ones we have now, for a relatively decent price, I mean, there's definitely room for people to start their own companies and go their own way. And if money is your thing, obviously owning your own company is definitely kind of the way to go. Definitely less stress in that, but there's definitely more money than working a day-to-day job. Work-life balance. If you work for a lot of the bigger companies, for the most part, you probably will be working 8 to 5 most days. There's going to be some times in the summer you're probably going to have to work either a little earlier in the morning or a little later at night, just to kind of get everything done that you need to. So for me, like I said, for instance, summer for me is unknown. We could be working 6 weeks straight. But then again, if it rains for 3 days, you get 3 days off for the most part, because there's really nothing to do once it rains. But typically it's again, like I said, it's for those that are hardworking. Holidays, depending on the company. So say Cargill was federally regulated. So you only started out with 2 weeks, and you could work your way up to 6 weeks, depending on how long you're with the company. Most companies in Saskatchewan that are provincially regulated, 3 weeks is pretty standard. And typically most people have up to 4 weeks. And you got to be a person that likes winter holidays. If you like spending, all summer at the park and not necessarily putting in the time when the sun is out, this might not be necessarily the career path for you, I should say. Very busy in the summers, very busy for certain times of the year. But in the wintertime, quite frankly, we got lots of time to do whatever we want. So therefore you can, do the Mexico trips, do the skiing trips, anything like that. And you shouldn't have too much time. And overtime, as much as you want. If you want to work every day, all day, somebody's going to find work for you. So questions, I guess.
Thanks, Nick. That was awesome. There's quite a variety of jobs you've worked through, and a nice broad base of sort of the ag business side of things.
Yeah, there's definitely, there are companies that only sell seed. There's companies that only sell equipment. There's companies that just strictly do agronomy for the most part. There's definitely a variety of jobs out there, and some that are more physically labored jobs, and some that you just kind of sit behind a computer and push buttons all day. So there's definitely a variety of things you can use. And like I said, if you want to be a grain buyer, you don't necessarily need to know anything about farming. You just need to actually know markets for the most part. So that might be maybe something a little bit more tailored towards somebody that didn't grow up in a rural setting, I should say.
It looks like there's a couple of guests that join us. Do you have any questions from the students? Just unmute and.
I want to thank Mike too. He had it was a very good presentation. I'm sitting here trying to think of questions that may need to be addressed, and like I said, you've done a very good job of addressing everything from wage to opportunities to, you know, expectations in the job as well too. So that's awesome. Yeah, I think we're good in this office. Thank you.
Mike, I was going to ask about how much of a role do you play in helping the farmers deal with crop rotations to reduce disease and that sort of thing?
You definitely give recommendations. More and more guys are starting to see what we've been preaching, I guess, for the last 10 years or so. But like the one guy said, like rotation and all this stuff is fine, but we actually need to make some money at this stuff too.
That's good. We can still hear you.
Oh, sorry. Somebody's trying to call me. But at the same time, oh no, I lost my train of thought. But basically, as we get more and more into disease and guys finding out that these diseases are not cured automatically, I should say, you definitely are giving them more and more advice every year of the potential problems they could run into in the long run, I should say. And the biggest problems we're running into is up north, you're having club root issues in canola. So there's actually fields that you cannot grow canola in anymore for the most part, or they're restricting you to. And there's actually fields in southern Saskatchewan you can't grow lentils anymore because there's a disease that basically eats the roots away and kills the plant immediately for the most part. And a lot of that is farmer. We did that to ourselves. So guys are starting to hear the stories and hear the horror stories. So they are starting to listen to the industry a little bit more and more. But yeah, we're at the point, not like your retails, because farmers are so busy. They're kind of relying on the retails. What do I grow? How do I grow it? What do I need to break even, and so on and so forth.
There is a question coming in.
Yes, Daniel, please ask the question. He's eating at the same time. I don't want to.
Sorry, guys. Thanks. I joined a little bit late, but I really appreciate kind of being able to sit here and listen. So, Mark, my question was kind of on the entrepreneurship side of things. You mentioned like a market for kind of innovation. So you're talking about maybe like app development. I would imagine maybe like automation and GIS. Did you have anything in particular, I think, that there was like a demand for? Because I've noticed in the last few months, like they have that Raven Industries going in Emerald Park, and I think farming it seems to be modernizing a lot more than I guess how we traditionally think about it. So I didn't know if you had any elaboration on that point.
Yeah, so I guess like what is the industry looking for the most part? So I guess just some of the stuff that's coming out. They are getting some automation in the industry where they are having combines and tractors and equipment that actually drive themselves for the most part. Now, I don't necessarily know if we need this yet, because that would take a lot of jobs away from the industry for the most part, but it is an industry that is lacking people. So therefore, obviously, if you can get something that automatically does something like just drive up and down a field all day, that lets the farmer do other things, I should say. The biggest thing is just tracking expenses and inputs versus what that farmer is actually getting for yield and what he's selling that at. So it's getting to the point now where, okay, I have a 160 acre field. This side of the field is producing phenomenally. This side is not. Why is this side not? What can we do to make this different, foot by foot, and so on and so on? Or just basically apps that can track all your grain sales, how much money I'm making on that grain sale, and then just kind of put it into a better layout, I should say, if you're making good or poor decisions, I should say. But again, there's variable rate, there's getting to be now variable seed, I should say. There's actually a drill coming out that on the same field you can plant 5 different types of seed. Say corn, for instance, down in the States, depending on the type of field, you might want to put a drought tolerant seed on the top of a hill and water resistant tolerant variety at the bottom of the hill for the most part. So there's a whole bunch of stuff like that going on, I should say. But as, believe it or not, the ag industry eventually is going to get younger. I think the average age of a farmer right now is probably in its low 60s, but there's a lot of us coming up that are in, you know, our low 30s to mid 30s, and we are wanting more apps that, quite frankly, work across multiple different types of equipment that can track what we do every day. And then, say, for the large farms, they just want to make sure that if they're paying somebody 25 hours to go out and spray, that he's not just taking the sprayer and going over the hill and sleeping all afternoon and only getting a little bit done. So then there's tracking of how long the equipment's at rest, how are you abusing the equipment, so on and so forth. Because it's definitely the idea of the family farm is slowly coming to an end. Basically, the farms are only getting bigger and bigger, and therefore we want to start running these places more like any other industry would. You want to be able to track what your people are doing. You want to be able to track your inputs and how much revenue you're generating.
There's a question from the chat too, from a person asking a question about how your experience was at the beginning. I'm not sure if there's more elaboration that could happen, but yeah, just
like as far as like joining certain companies and how it is to get started for the most part.
Sure.
I guess my experiences were pretty good. Cargill did a very good job at teaching you and welcoming you and giving you what you needed to know for the most part. It's not an old boys club or anything like that. We're looking for, if you're willing to come out and work, you will earn respect immediately. You don't necessarily need to know everything. And I would say it's definitely respect those in the industry already. Don't be the kid that comes out of college and knows everything. Because quite frankly, believe it or not, this is probably one of the rare industries where the college information is probably behind what people are doing in the industry for the most part, and then eventually makes its way back to the college and they confirm it for the most part. But no, I would say if you're looking to get into the industry from at the beginning, there's no hazing or anything like that, I should say.
I would think any industry that's short of people is going to be very welcoming, and then you earn from there, I would guess, eh?
Yeah. And I mean, and farmers, they're just, again, they're looking for somebody talented and loyal and smart as well. I mean, it's one of those things, if you come out and you know, you don't want to try, you don't want to move up in the world, and you just kind of sit in the office all day and collect a paycheck, you're not going to go very far. But if you show any type of ambition in any way, shape, or form, you're gonna go places in a hurry, I should say.
I'm just checking the chat to see if there's any other questions. Seeing any more. Okay, well, we know you're a busy guy. Thanks so much, Mike. That was a great presentation.
Perfect. No, thank you guys. And well, hopefully we can, hopefully it helps out in the long run, I should say.
Thank you.
All right, see ya.